And good afternoon again from Tokyo. This is Mr. Cybert going over with you the first lesson here. And I have with you los números, if I keep moving it around here. I put it all in a Word document, and I recommend when you start with students to have it ready. That way, it'll save you time and you can maximize the instruction. And that's what we want to do. We want to make sure we get the most out of our buck in the classroom. Now, usually when I begin with students and I start this, I'll tell them, we're going to go from 1 to 100 because most textbooks that you're going to work with, if you are working with one, or if you're working with other supplementary materials, are going to have you probably go from maybe 1 to 30, or I've seen as high as 1 to 50. But usually in one lesson, you'll never do 1 to 100. And you'll get some moans and groans from students who are like, oh, we're going to do all this in one lesson. And tell them, yes, you're going to get the most for your money. Okay. And I've broken it up into 5 patterns. I'm going to explain that. I've got my little mouse cursor right here. I'll explain how I do it in instruction, but I've also provided a video where I'm standing in front of my classroom here, showing how I do it. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and get started. First, when you do numbers, 1 to 10, quite easy. Say the number out loud and make sure you hear them pronounce it, okay? If you get, when you say uno, and they say uno, for example, it might be in the morning, they might not be awake. Say, make sure you reinforce it and you want to hear it nice and loud. Not screaming loud, but loud enough so that you can hear them pronunciate, okay? Once you get through 1 to 10, it should be pretty simple, okay? Now we're going to get to our teens. And what you're going to notice right away as I highlight it is there's a pattern. Make sure as you pronunciate it and they're repeating it, you are trying to show them the pattern. This is part of that indirect language I've talked about. But anyway, as you go through, once, doce, trece, when they hear that you even notice I've highlighted it and I've underlined it. As they're writing it in their notes, I would prefer, well, if they choose to write it, if you choose to type it, if you choose to give them a handout, make sure they highlight the That is going to help them recognize this pattern. And already we have 2 patterns, okay? We have our 1 to 10, which are just our básicos, and then we have our first pattern. And now for our second pattern, 16 to 20, okay? As you notice, DAC, 7, 18, 19. They're going to see the E, but what they're going to say is, wait a minute, why does this diez and this diez, if you notice they're spelled differently? Don't focus too much on grammar as a deflection. And I'm not saying that you're not going to teach it right away, but they're just not ready for it. I would deflect and say, we're going to learn about that later and focus on just the pronunciation and the number of the word. So 16, 17, all the way to 20. And right away, they're going to say, wait a minute, 20 does not fit the E. Easy way to tell students, this stops the pattern. That's exactly what I say to students. 20 stops your later teens. 16, 17, 18, 19, then 20. Stop. Okay? That will help them distinguish this pattern. It's been working very good thus far, and it's a good ending point. Now we're from 1 to 20. We're moving on. By this point, I would say you're probably maybe 10, no more than 15 minutes in. If they're writing notes, it's going to take a little bit longer. That's fine. But looking at our 20s, we'll see another pattern all the way through. Again, 21, 22, 23, etc. all the way down. Highlight that. Make sure they repeat it. Make sure they underline it, so that they recognize this pattern for this sequence of numbers. And already you can see, we have our 4 sequences. Then you notice we have the 1 to 10, which is your básico, that's what I call it, that's the first pattern. Your es, which is the second pattern. Your DAC up to 20, which is your third. Your 20s, and now the best part, okay? What you have here are your 10s. And I don't start with 31, 32, 43, 45, 56. No, that's too confusing. Start just with the 10s. And right away, they're going to recognize a pattern here. And you could probably see it for those who speak Spanish or for those who are first time teaching it. Emphasize it when you do the speaking. So say it out loud with them. 30, 40, 50. Now, obviously, that's not how we would say it naturally in Spanish. However, that is what you want them to hear, That A is what you want them to underline, bold, circle, highlight. Okay? Now we have the tens, and what we're only going to focus on are the tens up to 99. We're not going to worry about 100 yet. Save 100 for last. Believe me, they always say, save the best for last. So how are we going to negotiate this? If you notice where I've put the E, after each tens, you need a E, and then you have a blank. How I will usually teach it is using the numbers at the bottom that you see here. These are my practice tools, okay? I'm going to shorten it just a little bit to make the screen smaller. That way I can fit all the numbers on here to show you how this works. So we know how to say the numbers numerically. Now we need to fit in the ones for the tens. What do we mean? You're first. So what I usually do is I will point to a good, usually for those of us teaching, we know that we're going to have our students who are strong speakers. Focus on them first. That way they will help reinforce the others and make them say it. Now, I do not tell them, I point to it. So if this were on my board right now, I would, as I highlighted, I would be pointing to it and say, and look at the student, making a hand gesture that I want to hear them say it, and they would say 30. Then I would highlight this. They would say E, and then highlight this. How do you say that? Uno, right? Now, excuse me, put it together. 31. I make another student say it. 31. I make another student say it. 31. That way you have 3 students saying the same number. They should, by that point, recognize the pattern. Now, go to another student. Or if it seems confusing still at that point and you need to practice still, maybe go back to that stronger student to do the next number, okay? And your next number here is 42. How are we going to do that? Again, point, make the student say it, 40, then show them, point to it, E, okay? Then go to your singular, dos. Put it together, 42. Okay, another student, 42. I call this the rule of 2. And the reason is we've done 31 3 times, we've done 42 2 times, now we're going to do 53. And now we're going to call in a different student. I always make sure it's a different student. Depending on your class sizes, make sure you're getting all of your students in and make sure they're all speaking. Okay, I know I'm doing a lot of speaking of English here. When you teach it, it's going to be a little bit slower, but that's fine as long as they're speaking. And that's the goal. We want them speaking as much as possible. So again, same pattern. Look at a different student. That student by this time should see a pattern taking place. So 53. Now, if you've noticed what I've done, if they get that practice again with the student speaking, you can do this twice with the student. Then go through your numbers, 64, 75. And if you've noticed how I've created my practice numbers, I have it so that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the singular, and then I have all of the tens. So that way they're practicing all of the numbers, okay? This is the instruction part. Now the practice, okay? What I've done for you is created, this is kind of a lesson plan, it's very generic, but I want to really focus on the activities or the assessment. Okay, I have 4 here for you. The first one, I know I put it first, but I want to save it for last. And I'm going to explain that why in a minute. First, I think for numbers, your best bet, your best practice, your best assessment tool to show that they know or that they can at least handle the numbers are matemáticas. And for those of us that speak Spanish or those that don't, clearly math. They know math. And when you show them easy math problems, they're going to be able to put them together using the numbers. And there's a variety of ways to do this that I can show you in a video. And I'm also going to explain here in this video here. But you have your más. We highlight this here. Okay, for those that don't know, más means plus, menos, minus, por, times, dividido, divided by, son, equals. And then you just write out simple math problems. What I'll usually do is I have a small whiteboard, which I'll show in another video, that I can write out a math problem, and I'll make the student say it and solve it. 15 más 37 son 52. Okay, This gets the students speaking. If you don't have access to small whiteboards, you can use your notebook. You can use a piece of paper, or if they have their laptops, they can write some simple math problems just like you see here, okay? If you want pre-planned prompts where they have to say the math problems, that works as well. I recommend that. But this is that opportunity to get them practice speaking with the numbers, and math is a phenomenal way to do that, okay? When you feel as the instructor, the teacher, that they are ready to move on to the next practice, I would recommend más o menos. I show this in an activity. You write the number down. In small groups, the students will have to guess the number, okay? And the one who wrote the number will give them a clue. They will either tell them más, more, or menos. So for example, if the number is 81, if I write that number down, the students can't see it, they have to guess it. One student says 93, 93, okay? And I would say menos means less. The student should hear that cue and know that it cannot be higher than 93. To reinforce this, if you have a class, say where for some that might have some management issues, and you might get some that might intentionally say the wrong number, what I would recommend is practice doing this activity with the class, model it. I stand up in front with a whiteboard, I go through, and if that example happens, I will put the whiteboard down very calmly, and I will look at the class and say, in order to do this activity, you must, and I will point to my ear. And automatically they will say, listen, okay? If it happens again, I do the exact same thing. Now some say, you're wasting class time. Well, no, well, okay. What you're also doing is reinforcing saying the correct numbers, okay? In order to get the correct number, you have to listen, okay? And that's very important. And that's also important for speaking as well. If we get that far, I have here, conecta los puntos, or connect the dots. I don't have an example. You can find plenty online. Just connect the dots in Spanish. It's for probably younger, I would say maybe middle school. Definitely works with an elementary group that I worked with, but for high school, it might be too, I don't know, childlike. Might not be that good with them. But what will work with them is where we can include grammar, and that's number one. And this is the reason why I use this last. When you get to grammar, that's when they can apply the numbers. For them, it's just a number until they say, oh my gosh, yeah, this is where I can use it in actual speech. So I have here the pregunta, with the question, with the respuesta, the answer. And the question, ¿cuál es tu número de teléfono? What is your phone number? And then the answer, mi número es, okay? And have them create, I would say, a fake phone number. That's why I use fake phone numbers. I came from school where using real numbers or exchanging numbers was kind of not really accepted. So you want, just for practice purposes, to create a fake number. But make sure, again, if you have some knuckleheads that'll say my number is 555-556-666-666. No, that's not a real number. That you should have a good selection of numbers to practice this activity. In any case, these are 4 different activities that I use. I use them in a variety of ways, but mostly speaking. Again, make sure you're getting your students to speak. Rotate them around as well, okay? I will try to get my students to rotate around the class and be speaking with other students so that it's not always my strongest student speaking with the weakest student. No, they need to be able to hear different pronunciation. And as you're doing an exercise, for example, I will do maybe a 30 segundos. Now we might say, what is a segundo? Well, if I say minuto, they say minute. And now I say, aha, segundo, second. Now, 30. 30 seconds for one partner, 30 seconds for the other. 1 minute, ask the question, what's your number? Answer, ask the question, what's your number? Answer. That should take no more than a minute. Then they can rotate and practice using that grammar with others, with other students. Those 4 activities I have gotten through in a 60-minute period, confidently, that I felt students were able to move on with numbers. In fact, moving on to next lessons, in many years of teaching básicos in Spanish, I've been able to, at the most, 2 lessons, 2 periods, no more than 100 minutes. For those that are doing blocks, you can get through 1 block, 90-minute block period with this pretty confidently. But again, this is what I have. This is the way I do it. This is what works for me. Let me know what you think. I'll be providing a video where I'll be doing it in front of the classroom. Otherwise, hope you enjoyed. Leave feedback. Let me know, and have a great day.